going to be paid their November monthly salary, because the strike, of course, has cost the airline 1.2 billion shillings. And the National Carrier says it has suffered revenue dips because of that. But there is more that is festering underneath this particular layer of strikes at KQ. And right now, we're given to understand also they're looking for an investor, a foreign investor, to come and try to give that elephant dance to Kenya Airways, which has been on the Mayday call since, of course, I can't remember when. But right now, we just want to hear what are the ramifications for this new investor, and what does it portend for you, the shareholder, that also you have a scoop of that, a share at Kenya Airways. And I want just to, of course, point this question to the chair of the Nairobi Security Exchange, Kiprono Kitoni, of whom we've created first time this morning, to just tell us more on what is the health check of KQ as it is right now, especially with this strike.
Firstly, we are, as a Securities Exchange, very concerned about the financial and commercial well-being of Kenya Airways as a listed company and the only airline listed on the exchange in Nairobi. But I think it speaks to a more fundamental issue about the commercial viability of airlines in Africa.
Yes.
I mean, South African Airways has gone through a similar challenge. We've seen even the burgeoning new airlines in the region, Uganda and others, struggling to be profitable. I would say perhaps maybe only Ethiopia Airways seems to have been able to be successful commercially. But again, they're operating in a very different sort of environment where certain market forces are not quite, subjected to the forces of demand and supply as they are here in the free market that we operate in Kenya. But having said that, Kenya Airways for the last few years has been a suspended stock in the exchange. And my friend here, Iraqi, says he has some stocks there. And obviously for me, I would be happy if that airline would go back into profitability, for the share to be traded once again in order for shareholders to be able to realize value. Historically, there has been a commercial engagement between Kenya Airways and the KLM Air France group. Again, we haven't been told, to the full extent what the reason why that partnership has not been able to yield any positive outcome for the airline. Simultaneously, also, there have been a lot of concerns about the lease agreements between the airline in terms of the acquisition of the fleet that they have had been acquiring over the years. So that's been a source of concern. We also don't know what the full extent of that concern is, as well as other issues of a commercial nature. For us, it is welcome news to hear that there is a potential for a strategic partner. But also, I would like to suggest that maybe as a country, we need to start to look at Kenya Airways as a strategic asset. If we look at the most successful Middle Eastern airlines and interrogated their books, and I will not mention any names, but then many of the Middle Eastern airlines that we have today, commanding a significant global presence in aviation, are actually loss-making. But they are viewed by their countries as strategic assets to drive traffic and to create a hub and spoke around their major metropolises of their capital cities. So it is possibly a time that we need to start to look at that. I think Kenya Airways had a huge competitive advantage in the early days when many African countries actually transited through Nairobi. And I think as a country, we lost the opportunity. I can remember, I think it was about 13 or 14 years ago when I was preparing myself to take on the role of leading the Chamber of Commerce. And I remember Nigeria used to transit all its tourists to the Middle East via Nairobi. I think there were 100,000 passengers per annum coming in through Lagos to various other destinations across the world. As a country, we never took advantage of it because we stereotype the West Africans. We say these are not people that we want to deal with, and we let them come into the airport and fly out. So today, we've lost that traffic because the airlines from the destination that they were going to flew directly to their cities and took the passengers away from us. Not only did we lose that traffic, but we also lost the tourist potential because we never looked at them as potential tourists into our country. So back to Kenya Airways, I think it's, for me, we would like to see that airline back on the market sooner rather than later. And I really commend the leadership of Kilavuka in trying to resolve this problem, in advance of the festive season.
So What is the partnership also with the South African Airlines so far that we can see? There's a code sharing. What else does that really portend for Kenya Airways, and why the South Africa Airlines? They've been suffering just the same way KQ has been suffering, same ailment. It's like a blind man leading another blind man. Yeah, all of you will fall in a pit.
I was in Pretoria last November when the MOU was signed on the sidelines of the state visit by President Kenyatta, a partnership agreement between Kenya Airways and South African Airways. And at that point in time, my thinking was that it was a partnership that sought to take advantage of the routes that they currently have, and also the economies of scale in terms of code sharing and being able to sort of consolidate traffic on the routes that they both operate on.
Yeah. All right.
I have a couple of concerns on Kenya Airways, and I am going to come in from an angle of saying, like, decision making without full information. So we still have to make decisions without full information. I think the way I see part of the problem of Kenya Airways is, and particularly its interaction with the public sector side, is working. There's a bit of groping in the dark. If Kenya Airways has to be assisted, I think we must allow it to go fully commercial. And I would say, differing a bit with my much more knowledgeable colleague on this issue, Kiprono, that it is that strategic interest we seem to seek in KQ that has sheltered the bad secrets. What's the cost of leasing of aircraft? The other day somebody said that procurement, even other forms of procurement are at exaggerated rates. The lending that has come from the state side, and me having been on the finance committee at one time in Parliament, you say no to these loans and the loans still go because of a strong quote-unquote strategic interest that is not articulated. The funds go in and they sink in. Some of the funds have gone in to relieve some known names who are big lenders to the airline. We just do many, many bad things in respect of Kenya Airways. And in the Middle East, I would say, in assessing the relevance of the airlines, first, of course, they have the money, they can keep supporting them and propping them up. But the fact that they have become major shopping complexes of the world and so on, there are some economic benefits, being able to get into Dubai, to Doha, to, which is the other one, I think there are three. And so there are certain benefits, including fostering the question of a state, the sovereignty of a nation, and blah, blah. Those are intangible benefits. But in Kenya Airways, it's not that clear. Kenya is fairly competitive, I would say, in terms of the aviation industry domestically, thanks to others other than Kenya Airways. So I think so long as we think that flying the Kenyan flag under this particular entity called Kenya Airways is a great thing, it's going to be difficult to get them out of the mess, because we do not understand fully what the mess is. And as I've said before, all of this support Kenya Airways that is being done should be done on their balance sheet. We should understand from within where it is that they ought to get, that they can get the funds and get out of the problem. But we just can't come and pour money into an account which now they will draw down, says we have a loan. We don't know fully what the hell they're doing with the money. I think that we're still a long way from saving them. We're just going to sink money in there until the analytics of it are correct. The analytics we don't know because information is hidden a lot of times.
Business analytics.
Business analytics, yes. That's the one I'm talking about, yes, absolutely.
Yeah. All right.
I'm using balance sheet as a proxy for the commercial form of approach, form of lending. And if after that, there's still a bit that must be paid by the public, that's where the strategicness will come from, then maybe you can put in a limited amount of support. But the bulk of this must come from a good, rigorous analytics of their business.
Right. Professor Iraki?
I think I'm the wrong person to respond to this issue because I'm not a happy man. About 15 years ago, I bought some shares for Kenya Airways and at 145 shillings. Now you have heard my colleague saying it is suspended. It is no longer traded at NSE. And the last time I checked here, it was costing between 1 shilling and 9.50. So I have lost money.
When was it suspended?
He said 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
So I invested, but there are no returns. But I'm one of those people who believe that KQ is a viable project. I have no doubt about that.
But what happens if you bought shares, it's suspended? How do you as an investor, that is just something that you have to bite, the bullet and move on? Or what really happens?
You wait for a miracle.
Just sit and wait.
You just sit and wait for something to happen. Okay.
The stock exchange is governed by a regulator, the Capital Markets Authority.
Just a moment here. Yes.
And the Capital Markets Authority, we have what they call an SRO, the self-regulatory arm of the NSE itself, that also looks at the viability and the health of enterprises. And Kenya Airways is not the only suspended stock. If we look at companies like Deacons, their stock was suspended. We've had quite a number of enterprises that over the years are non-performing, and they become almost like junk stock in the sense that the stock itself intrinsically has no more real value. And in order to protect new shareholders from getting into those stocks, the shares are suspended by the regulator while the commercials are looked at. But I do also agree with Mr. Bunyasi, Honorable Bunyasi, that we really need a mix of two things. We need a mix of complete commercial re-engineering of Kenya Airways to turn its fortunes from what it is today to perhaps a better trajectory where it can be profitable. But I do not doubt myself whatsoever that it requires also an element of public participation. We've seen the government plowing in large sums of money. And I think for me, my greatest wish as the chair of the NSC is that this be done sooner rather than later in order for shareholders like Wanairaki to be able to realize value of their investment. You see, markets are driven by sentiments, and sentiments are driven by the fundamentals of enterprise. So, for us, we want to really see that this market is lifted. Like you asked me a few moments ago, what's in stock for us? The government has committed 10 IPOs. The government has committed to supporting REITs. The new government is also mobilizing the pension industry to support national development plans. So there's very many things that are happening.
Excellent.
And, but also we must appreciate the fact that when you go to the market, there are going to be gains, there are going to be losses. Nothing ventured, nothing gained.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry.
So can I continue my
please,
conversation?
Please.
Yeah. Thank you for the highlight. The reason why I'm saying that Kenya is a viable project is anytime I take Kenya Airways or I take Jabojet and other local airlines, they're always full. And Kenyans have become sophisticated and time conscious. If you look at matatus, they have come up with a very interesting innovation, something called shuttles. Instead of carrying 14 people or 18 people, they are carrying 9 people. Because people want the matatu to feel faster and go to the destination. They're starting value in time. And if you can get that to Kenya Airways, then you can see it as a viable option. People want to save time by flying from one destination to the other. So
that's why the A380 picked very well.
I think the market is there. The problem with the Kenya Airways are probably two. One is governance. We are always seeing pilots and the management fighting one another. And number two is their strategic decisions. I have a feeling they expired too fast without looking at the fundamentals. They leased too many planes and did not look at the future of the market. We must accept there were problems like war in Ukraine, the hike in price of fuel. But I think the biggest problem, in my opinion, is the lack of identity of Kenya Airways. Is it a private company? Is it a public-owned company? It's like a moron. So I think it's the time we decided, do we want Kenya Airways to be fully private, let the market do its work, or do you want the government to take it over, like they were trying to do, and let the public run it like Ethiopia? On the issue of South Africa and Kenya Airways, I think that's a good idea. I've noted some of the most stable marriages are the ones where the man and the woman met when they were suffering. And they grow together. So Kenya Airways and the KQ and Kenya and South African Airways can make a very good combination because both of them
Not
are
in this
suffering.
epic of time.
They can
Both of you are suffering.
They can combine the suffering and come up with something viable.
I think I want to speak from KIP. And KIP, that's something even when I was the other life in the government.
You're still in the government.
And I've already, actually one student, I'm looking, how do you do domestic borrowing for public projects off budget?
Yeah.
I think that's what the president is really saying. We can fund the express highway off budget. And that now goes to mobilizing the institutions we have. KQ is an interesting animal, and I'm not sure, we have sagas in this area. There's a time it wanted to Kenya Airports Authority. You know, you're collapsing and you want to take over something which is, well, the deputy president has pointed out the state capture. I'm not sure about what he meant by that. But about KQ, if you look at the turnover over the years, KQ, it has been great. Their turnover is good. It's now when you look at the costs, it eats all the turnover. So there's something they need to focus on, the fundamentals, as Keith is bringing up here. But one of the key things, in my view, which drives an airline, Rwanda Air, hardly 6 years in the market, got a diamond recognition because of its hygiene, keeping time, yeah, and the whole idea of its service. And today, if I was going to pay a ticket, and that's perhaps the biggest challenge with KQ, if I want to go to Kigali today, and I'm paying Aswainaina, I'll actually go to Rwanda Air because it's cheaper. I'll take me there. If you look in terms of airlines in Africa, Kenya Airways is perhaps most expensive than any other. Compare with ET. Compare with Emirates. By the way, Emirates has the best record in Nairobi. It has the shortest turnaround time in Nairobi. And a plane is making money when it's in the air. It doesn't make money when it's on the ground.
Of course. And
my understanding here is, even you look at the market share of Kenya Airways, and perhaps the point Iraq was bringing, the market share of Kenya, it's higher in Africa than going to China, than going to India. Domestically, these other small airlines have a higher market share. And something we have said before, how can Kenya Airways become the conduit between all these southern China airlines? You bring every African to Nairobi, Southern Airlines take them to China. And Southern Airlines brings every African to Nairobi, and Nairobi Kenya Airways distributes to Africa. Focus on your market share. The highest they have is in African continent.
Yeah.
Not outside there. And that way, you can actually get that advantage. I remember one time when there was on Ethiopian, taking a flight from here to Lagos, and my God, we reached somewhere in Congo, and the whole thing was almost shuttles, the Ethiopian Airlines. I took about 5 years later, Kenya. It was smooth. So you can leverage on Africa. The medical people going to India. Bring them here. Let the other airlines take them to India. So there's an opportunity for this airline. I am not for the idea that we are protecting. At what cost can we protect our national identity? At what cost? Because if the government puts that kind of money, that money is actually taxpayers. So we could actually be utilizing that for better aspect in terms of that. But I think as I close this argument, let's also be positive KQ. KQ has managed to decrease their loss at an increasing rate. They were 36B, they are now about 9B. That's tremendous. It's tremendous improvement. And I hope we can get on the same trajectory in reducing that.
All right.
However, the issue of governance, I think and I've said this before, when you're in something for about 10 years, relax. Give other people opportunity to come and learn the outfit. Yes. We got a very strong man in KCB. Did 10 years, Martin O'Dwell. Did 10 years, left. He's now going to Stanbic. William, Ogala. Oigara, sorry. Get somebody, and the corporate world, and Keith is here, apparently he oversaw the lecturer, very successful in his own way. The chamber 10 years. He left. People are saying, no, stay. General Karangi told Kibaki, in 2 years I'm leaving. And he left. Let Michael Joseph and his team who have been there for ages, and we are not seeing anything. Relax. Let's bring other Kenyans who can turn the airline around. It's possible to turn it without pumping more to go. Pumping and you're not getting, it's not a business. It doesn't make business sense at all.
All right. I want just to come back to NSE, because we saw the president really trying also to, stanch that particular drought that we've had at Nairobi Security Exchange as far as IPO is concerned, and promising that we'll have at least 10 state-owned companies being privatized and listed at the NSE. Question would be, since we're struggling to see what Kenya Airways it is right now, is it a government-owned company? Is it a private? What is Kenya Airways? Can it just go fully if we have an investor taking it the private way? And since it's listed and suspended, what are the mechanics? Do you draw back from you are delisted, then you list afresh as a private company, or what mechanics really works around there?
You see, if
can that be considered also as a private company to bail out KQ?
I mean, there are very many options around the quagmire that is the current situation of Kenya Airways. If the balance sheet of Kenya Airways can be resolved through a major capital infusion, then the share can be floated again. Professor Wainaina has said, I mean, the loss making, the hemorrhaging of Kenya Airways has been reducing. On the graph is quite positive in terms of the reduction of its profitability, of its loss making. So that in itself speaks to the fact that there is hope at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
It is possible to take that 9 billion shilling loss into a profit, as we saw Kenya Power do in the year 2019, 2020. Right. And I think for me, the important things that need to be done is to address the governance, to address the re-engineering of their cost structure, to look at their strategic imperatives and etc. So those are things that are within the ambits of its board of directors, who are supposed to direct the affairs and lead management in ensuring that those things are implemented. But back to the stock, I mean, there are many options. It could be taken over by government, in which case obviously the shareholders who are there today will need to be paid off. But that's the least desirous route, because then it doesn't become a for-profit institution, it becomes another parastatal. And what we really want to see is a movement in the opposite direction. We'd like to see more state-owned enterprises moving from public ownership into the private sector with a strong profit motive. And back to what's going on in the markets, and I think you asked that question. Yes, we did have a visit by His Excellency the President about 3 weeks ago. His messaging was very uplifting. In fact, one day after the President came to the markets, the NSE all-share index rose by 14 points. And it's on the back of strong messaging. It's on the back of positive messaging. It's on the back of giving investors hope. And, I've said it before on TV, and I repeat it again today. There's too much money chasing African stocks. There's too much money chasing emerging and frontier market opportunities. Because these markets, of course, they come with a higher risk, but they also come with a potential higher return. If you look at our bond market today, at between 13 and 14% return, globally, there's almost unprecedented. So many investors are interested in that. The challenge that we have in this market, and it's a challenge that we are addressing now, is we don't have enough products. We don't have enough stocks. We are. I mean, if you look at the NSE with close to 50 listed companies, maybe a third of them are actively trading on a daily basis. Many of the stocks, the plantation stocks and others, you will see them very static over extended periods of time, and that's not the point. And then again, you see, if we look at what has happened over the last few years, retail participation by Kenyans has been on an all-time low, because many Kenyans actually do not understand the whole idea of trading. If you look at our, the generation of our parents, the generation of our grandparents, they bought a stock and died with it. And, that was not the whole idea. We would like to, really go out, especially in advance of the IPOs that we anticipate will be there in 23, to do a massive civic education to Kenyans to make them understand what trading is, to be able to buy low and sell high and get the arbitration, get the arbitrage, of the profits that come from that activity. We'd also want, I've asked the question many times, why does the exchange open at 9 a.m. and close at 4 p.m.? Why can't we create a platform, and my teams are burning the midnight oil trying to see whether they can do that. Why can't we trade 24 hours? So that, for example, if you have a sick patient at night and you're holding stocks and you're at a hospital waiting to pay deposit for them to be admitted, and you have a stock, you should be able to trade it at night and get liquidity. You should be able to buy the same stock back the next day if you put money out of your bank account. So you see, we'd like to create a 24-hour seamless trading platform.
Now, what is holding us back?
We'd like to see access.
What is holding us back?
The technology is going on now. I mean, the activity is going on. That's part of my own KPI as chairman of the NSC. I would want to see a 24-hour trading platform. I want to see a market that is tradable on your phone. And you can see we've already started the journey. We last year signed an MOU with Safaricom where you can convert your bonga points to shares. Yeah, so there's many initiatives going on. But I think for me, the single most significant thing that I see happening is the commitment by government that they'll give us 10 IPOs.
Absolutely.
We're also speaking to
Makes
many
a lot of sense.
owners of family-owned enterprises that are scalable. We want to see them bring their businesses to the market. We want to look at the incentives that are available today and ask ourselves the question, why is it that people who own family-owned enterprises, scalable ones, we want to talk to people like Vimal Shah, we want to speak to Keroche, we want to speak to Thika Coffee Mills, we want to speak to all these family-owned enterprises and ask them, why is it that they don't see it as a viable option? We're also speaking to the owners of private equity funds. The PE market is very, very active in terms of mergers and acquisitions. But we want to engage the PE ecosystem and ask them why they can't look at the markets as one of their routes to offload their holdings. Companies like Java, companies like Art Cafe have been bought and sold by PEs, over an extended period over the last few years. Hospital groups and etc. So we want them to all see the market as a viable route to exit their capital.
Indeed. I think good initiative. I wanted just to come back with you, Bunyasi Sako. The issue of corporate governance also just within KQ, because I think that is one of the highlights that we've had from this particular forum, that there is a problem with the corporate governance. Where do we bring in now the corporate governance code from the Capital Markets Authority? And how then do we also compare? Are they been following doggedly with what is happening at KQ right now, so that we can be able to understand that there's a genesis of the problem of governance from KQ? We've had Gituro saying maybe even the board members should be, if they're not really performing very well, then they should be shown the door. But Michael Joseph just
resign.
Resign.
Yes, that's in the corporate.
Or retire.
I'm not turning this thing around. What the hell am I doing here?
But you need to give me time as well to turn this elephant around.
I've given you 10 years.
They are doing that.
Well, Michael Joseph is hardly 10 years. They are easy. I think it's not even been 5 years. So far, I can't remember.
Yes, I've always, just a quick one on this before I get into the substance I want to say. Think about Michael Joseph. I've always wondered how much should be pinned on the person. I know he led Safaricom at a time when there was tremendous growth, so people kind of thought he was a huge corporate hero of some kind. And I think it's that's being purchased to put into KQ. It's perhaps not working as well. But I just wanted to say this, that issues of the type such as KQ, and at some stage maybe still the issue KPLC and so on, when they have a blind spot, a spot in which nobody fully understands what it is, a bit like the SGR, you have this contract, there's a deeper contract and so on, that's where you begin to get problems. And I would have thought that in fact the management of the NSE, as it happens in other exchanges, for KQ to be fully traded, they would have to demand that there is sufficient transparency in the decision-making processes within the entity, so that shareholders are not misled to buy a share that's propped up briefly because of something or other that's not sustainable. They blamed the fuel prices and that they had hedged wrongly some years back. I know people always make mistakes, but not such as to completely hobble you. Now we are talking about leasing arrangements that are not fully transparent, and those are governance issues within this system. So as we get to the individuals also perhaps on this, I think there are broad principles that KQ doesn't seem to, from a layman's point of view, a layman is one who does not understand the inside story fully. But it strikes one that there are opportunities there if these were streamlined. We would know the full extent of the profitability or the lack of it. And then you make a conscious effort to prop up knowing the extent to which you want to prop up, but you have certain outcomes. And there are opportunities to do that. For example, each year, or every other year, there is a request for lending to KQ, not for lending, for supporting KQ. 100 billion there, whatever the figures, that's not a huge deal for KQ, but certainly a huge deal for taxpayers. That's a time in which you can also demand some reciprocity to say, we want you to able to look carefully, to tell us this, and that. And we have many analysts. If I just take the professor here, for example, he'll tell us the best of his students. They'll go in and help do the commercial analytics in this area. And it will say, these are way off. And we have to have a timetable for getting them back in line. But we're not doing any of that. We are simply pumping in money and not using a commercial approach to supporting. Globally, and I think Kip here has a much better recall on this than I will have, but let me mention it anyway. We have had cases of airlines that went under, even when they used to get some state support. Some of you remember Panam. Panam was globally the airline the old British Airways, it was used to be called British Overseas something. BOAC. They all had to go certain major, in the case of Panam, they actually went under. And they closed down. I mean, that's what carried the American flag, blah, blah, but those arguments were finally dropped. BOAC and British Airways now is probably doing a lot better. I don't know the real profitability, but Europe has also got rules to manage state, the kind of state support that you can put in and how you put it in. KLM, all these airlines have had their share of trouble, but there has been a willingness to completely get to the root cause. In Kenya, we don't seem to get to that root cause at all. We seem to stop at some point and begin to whisper. Why should we whisper? If you're talking about leasing of aircraft, how many have been leased? Who are the substantive owners of the leasing companies? Because there's a suspicion that some of them are local, and therefore they're using sort of managed ways in which they get paid a hefty sum through some preferential treatment that is also creating a burden on the airline. And then there are other distributive efficiency type indicators that we should also look at. I just think the debate around Kenya Airways is shrouded in mystery, and that veil must be removed for us even to help that airline become viable. South African Airways, you would recall, Kip, under the apartheid regime, it was highly supported. And it was, glory, you'd think it was a profitable outfit. It wasn't a profitable outfit. But they did it so for the sake of maintaining their name, as a fight against apartheid. You don't like apartheid, but see how good the airline is. It wasn't that good. So when that veil was lifted and resources were taken elsewhere to help, then of course it's also struggling. But I'm sure they can get out of it, or maybe they're getting out of it, because they are much more aggressive in opening up these dark areas than Kenya seems to be.
Let's hear from Professor here, Iraqi, the question of why is the capital markets also mealy-mouthed about KQ? You were raising very germane questions regarding also some of the leasing. Where is the whole question of corporate governance coming in? How is the board involved in passing this, some of these decisions like leasing, and how can we probe that?
I think as a shareholder, if Kenya Airways is given 26 billion by the government, I would want to know how that money is used as a shareholder. So I think there should be more transparency in what Kenya Airways is doing. For example, who are the suppliers of Kenya Airways? Do they supply Kenya Airways at the best price? And when it comes to the board, we also need to know how are they selected. Of course, because the government has a very big say, you expect the government to have a very big say on who is going to sit in a board. And I think this issue of governance is coming out because of the moron nature of Kenya Airways. Is it private? Is it public? So once we make it clear who owns Kenya Airways and how it is supposed to be run, out of those things will be clear. And I'm hoping we are going to get a strategic investor who is going to pump money and turn the Kenya Airways around. Because I believe it is definitely a viable project. I have no doubt about that. And I need to mention something about what Kip talked about IPOs. I remember when East African breweries want to raise some money, I think they wanted to raise 11 billion through a board. It was oversubscribed. They got $97.9 billion of Kenyan shillings. So clearly there's a lot of money in the market that we can use for IPOs. Another big advantage of IPOs is that we are going to stop thinking about land. Everybody is now putting money into land. So as investors, we are going to have an option excuse me, so that I can diversify my portfolio and buy something else. But more importantly is why these family-owned businesses, as he asked, are not floating their shares. Why they don't go to the stock exchange? I think we need to have more confidence in NSE. Because when you see Kenya Airways behaving the way it is behaving, and other shares being dormant, and we put our money there, then we are reluctant to do that. We are reluctant to risk our money. So once we build confidence in NSC, and I'm very happy about the work he's doing, you are going to see more people going and listing their companies there and us buying shares. Finally, I'm happy that NSC should operate 24 hours. I always wonder, if I can dance the whole night, if I can drink beer the whole night, why can't I trade the whole night? So I think that's a good initiative, and please implement it. I'll be the first person to trade at midnight.
Yeah. You know, Kenya is a very interesting economy. You know, I am also a Safaricom dealer, and in 2007, we were invited to the Regency Hotel for the launch of M-Pesa. Another time, we were very busy selling airtime and selling lines and selling handsets. And actually, we thought it was a bit of a waste of our time to start to sell M-Pesa. I remember Hugh Herschel and Michael Joseph, running us through the PowerPoint presentation. And that was in 2007. 15 years later, 1/3 of our GDP is transacted on M-Pesa. So if we can be as innovative and as embracing of new ideas, I see no reason why we cannot use the very same platform to actively trade in stocks, in bonds, as we should. And you can have my commitment that we are really going to try our best to push towards a 24-hour market. We're going to try our best to see that we can create a seamless interaction between the public, the common mwananchi, who even makes 500 shillings a day to be able to buy a stock, or to buy a piece, a REIT, or to buy a bond, a fraction of a bond, and etc. But again, you know, markets, and I emphasize this point, markets are driven by sentiments. You know, people want to see the performance of markets. You see, we've had bonds here that have failed. You know, we had the Imperial Bank bond, we had the Nakumat bond, where people put money in, and that money vanished. So we also want to engage with the National Treasury, we want to engage with the Central Bank and with the Capital Markets Authority to see that there's a safety net for investors, so that we can actually do proper and sound due diligence, so that nobody buys into something that tomorrow their money vanishes. That is the easiest way to make people go back to, you know, buying of property. Tomorrow I'll be actually making a presentation somewhere on the diversification of investment portfolios. But I want to just disabuse one notion about, which I think, just responding to Honorable Bunyasi, the NSC actually does have a very effective SRO committee. So we look into the analytics of the business of companies. We look into their P&Ls, all listed companies and potential listed companies. We look into their P&L, we look into their metrics. We analyze their balance sheets. We look at their debtors creditors portfolio. We make sure that the stock that sits on the market is a stock that is going to, you know, be able to realize value for its investors. We even have a watch list, even amongst the existing 50-odd companies that are listed on the exchange. We have a watch list of those companies that have had an extended period of loss-making or an erosion of their balance sheet values. We look at the extraneous activity. I mean, if we read something in the newspaper, like we read about a listed company recently that was involved in some funny transactions, we actually summon them. The SRO committee summons them to explain, because you know, if something ends up in the paper, maybe about you know, a protracted legal situation or whatever, potentially fraudulent activity, we summon them to the exchange and we interrogate them and we make sure that our investors on the market are safe. We have today about 2.8 trillion shillings of equities trading in the market. Is it a lot? It's nothing. It's very little compared to what it should actually be. We need to see many of these other companies that I'm talking about earlier on coming to the market. We need to look at the criteria of listing. You know, when I went to the exchange, I found one of my observations was that we were doing too many things. And I've been advocating to our board, and gladly they have embraced it, that instead of, you know, trying to run 10 different projects, why don't we just focus on the big ticket issues? Like now, we want to go for listings in a big way. And that's what, for me, is my big, hairy, audacious goal. We want to get the listings. And I'm glad that President Ruto is on the same school of thought. We have visited many of the leading global exchanges. We visited with Euronext in France. And Euronext in France was actually driven by state-owned enterprise listings. All these water companies that we see here, Nairobi Water, Zowasco, the ones in the Athi River Water, you know, in countries like France, those would be listed entities. And what will that do? It'll sanitize them from political process. You'll have effective working boards. You'll have profitable enterprises. Because these are utility companies selling water. There's no reason why they cannot make.
But I think I think you're right. But it's something also that, and I love you can see the importance of politics, how it impacts on the NSC. So if you get the right things, you have that crowd. Unfortunately, I think the CS I think yesterday or other day she was saying people will pay more. And one of the things that it's want to go to have the private sector in terms of building the dams. The 1,000, 10,000 want to build. When you make the statement that you pay more because we are going to play the private sector, that doesn't anger well. I will not invest in that. Because you're telling me, if this dam is going to be done by private sector, then I'll charge you more than you can pay. You are better off keeping quiet. But I think and I'm happy that I had opportunity when we brought Salawu with all this. Do self-regulation.
Yeah.
And that's the best way to go. The King 4, very, very clear. And the whole issue that you have that analytics unit. I think NSC need to step back and say, we are going to risk. What are the benefits? Now, you look at the three companies which were this year, last Friday and the other Friday were declared really contributing to that, KCB.
Safaricom.
So I looked at even from a Kenyan, this is a company which is paying more taxes for a development of the country. So be actually looking, I want to invest in that company. Safaricom, breweries. So these are the things we need to take them 190. And I remember the time of Kengen, Safaricom, all those IPOs. People really went to that. People realizing the investment now is perhaps in the stock market. But we need to step back and tell them 190, these are the benefits when you get into this. If I had some, I would really invest a lot in the stock land, buying a piece of land, as he's pointing out.
Let's hear from Justin. We'll come to you.
I just wanted to touch on two quick points that I think are very important that Mr. Kiprono touched on. When he said that a better understood and better functioning NSE will take the pressure of land, as it were, of thinking that the only way to invest viably is to buy land. Yeah. And that would have huge ramifications for the economy. The cost of land in your investment portfolio will now not be a big item. Even its access, that has become very difficult in the ease of doing business. And that's, I think, an extremely powerful one. The second one is that there are very few people who are literate in terms of stock exchange type investment or trading. Literacy levels there are low. And by literacy, of course, I'm not talking about reading and writing, just understanding how you can make money on this, how it's done, and at what level do we begin. It will have to go far deep down, even to schools perhaps finally, but just somehow the level of education is low. And I'm not talking about schools again, quote education. For example, now our literacy in communication technology with the handsets has really improved. That I see in the village, even people who don't know how to read and write know how to make a phone call and receive M-Pesa funds. That has really gone deep and it's working well. I think we do need a tremendous amount of education. I saw it when I lived in the US for some time with my children. When they were younger, that were encouraged to invest for them. There are simple investments that were done, and they have to understand that this could go up, could go down, could become richer, you can become poorer. How do you make those decisions? And I think gradually we'll all get kind of learned educated in this. That's really an important initiative. I just wanted to add.
There's a lot of CMA that should be actually taking the lead in that.
That's CMA.
I think I like what Tony has alluded, that they are doing very serious civic education, because people to understand what stocks are about. That the same way you can.
Is it really civic?
The same way you can civic, because there's some politics involved. Because in addition to buying stocks and making money out of them, you can also have your children inherit them the way you inherit land. But more importantly, I wish, Kiptono, you have said that you have learned something from betting companies. They have made so much money by using the phone. So once you go there, you can be sure that NSC will reach more people, more Kenyans, and more trading because of that. But I want you to go beyond just stocks and shares. Talk also about derivatives. We need to trade derivatives. About 20 years ago, I did a study on, and he even supervised that study, prospects of derivatives market in the Kenyan market. It has not grown as fast as expected. I saw the hard copy in my library the other day. Yes, but you also need to take us beyond Kenya. How many Kenyans bought Facebook shares at IPO? How many people bought Google shares at IPO? Or iPhone and so on? So I think we need to not just expand NSC, but also go global. I'll be very glad if I was having some shares of Google or Facebook or one of these big companies.
But not Twitter.
Not even Twitter.
Yeah, we'll come to Twitter a bit. We'll come to Twitter a bit. But I just wanted to ask.
Let's go beyond the border.
Yeah. The derivatives, I think it's hardly 5 years now since we launched. But how is it faring?
Very frankly, it's been slow.
It's been slow.
We are the third market in Africa to launch a derivatives exchange. So we do have a derivatives actively trading. But there's a very low understanding of derivatives in this country. But the good news is that the graph is upward.
Okay.
Yeah, and as part of the outreach that we'll be having to educate people about financial literacy and trading, we will be also focusing on those. But not just that. I think we are also in the innovative space. We are actively exploring a commodities exchange. We are working with the government, and Honorable Moses Kuria is very keen on that being launched sooner rather than later. But we are asking the government if they can go through the motions, because we've got to make sure that all the building blocks are in place. We've got the proper warehouse receipting system, we've got the right infrastructure, we've got the commodity, we've got scalable commodities that we could trade. So we are working on that. We are working on the carbon exchange. As you saw, we recently signed at NIFCA the memorandum of understanding to set up a carbon exchange that Kenyan companies that have, even like people like Kenya Forest Services, they have huge carbon credits that they need to bring to market and trade. So at companies that are involved in carbon positive activities that are not compliant can buy the credits from the others that are being able to give their credits to the market. We are looking at crypto exchange, and in fact we are encouraging the government to create a task force, and I think Bitanga Ndembo was very active in that. We need to not bury our heads in the sand and say that crypto doesn't exist. Yes, there are challenges, it's early days, but for me, I think it's an area that we need to wrap our minds around, and I think if the world is moving in that direction, why shouldn't we as a country also start to get to learn more? But onto the issue of property, I'm one of the people who's very excited that property prices are correcting. Why? Because we need to demystify this thing of property. One of the things that actually discourages foreign investment into Kenya is the cost of land.
That's true.
And historically, what has driven the cost of land? The cost of land has been driven by corrupt money by public servants who are hiding their money. It is driven by money being laundered from neighboring countries, Congo, Sudan, and other places by public officials, etc., smuggling, piracy, and etc. So if you look at it, the cost of land, like in Nairobi, when at the point they were telling us that 1 acre in Upper Hill was 700 million shillings, what activity would you do on that land that will actually give you a return on that investment? And the reality is that it wasn't actually driven by the fundamentals of demand and supply. So when Kenya embraced KYC, Know Your Customer, and AML rules and policies, we've seen over the last 10 years the price of land actually correcting. And what does that do? It gives more people the incentive to buy land to invest in it. My friend Dr. Kimngetich all the time speaks about dead assets. It's very controversial. Presentation houses about dead assets, and I agree with him. I mean that we need to start to look at land as something you can invest in, if you'd like to add value. If you're buying land for agricultural purposes, deploy that land for agricultural purposes. If you're buying it for real estate development, deploy that land for real estate development. But in the past, what people have been doing is they've just been banking land. Yeah. Instead of putting money in the bank or in stocks or in bonds, you go buy land. So for me, the correction of land prices is actually an incentive for people to invest in capital markets.
Right.
I need to say this one. I changed my thesis. I changed my thesis and I finished 1993, and I did in futures in commodities. And I told my supervisor, the supervisor wanted to do something we call input-output analysis, Leontif Wesley. And I told him, I'm doing this, changing to futures because our country, in the next 20 years, there will be in a commodities market. Please fast track it, keep.
Yeah. Commodities market.
Actually, that's what I did my work on, and I could see trading more in commodities as opposed to perhaps what we are doing at NSC.
All right. We are due for a short break, but when we circle back, we question also what is happening in some of these unicorn companies right now, the Twitter, Facebook, we have Amazon. All of them have announced right now they're laying off. We thought now, in this epoch of time, investing in these companies is a way to go. What is really happening? And we have our own CEO survey, and according to the sentiments of the CEO as well, laying off is the only solution to keep afloat for these companies. Is that the way to go? We question that on the other side of a break. And of course, we interrogate Twitter and the blue tick that is costly right now. Don't go away.